You are looking at Sci Fi running on an Amiga 500. It had a very limited release in 1989, so you are probably seeing it for the first time here. At the time, the Amiga felt like something from the future. Smooth scrolling, bright colors, arcade quality sound. For anyone coming from 8-bit home computers, it was a huge leap forward. What you're seeing on screen now is the result of that moment in time. When home computers were finally starting to feel like the arcade, I loved playing shoot 'em ups in the arcade. Games like R-Type were a huge inspiration. They weren't just about reflexes, they were about atmosphere, pacing, and spectacle. Huge sprites, layered backgrounds, enemies filling the screen. Sci-Fi was my attempt to bring that arcade feeling home. A fast-scrolling sci-fi shooter running on an Amiga 500. Before Sci-Fi, I had developed Blood Valley, which was published by Gremlin Graphics. After that came Hill 19. Hill 19 was an arcade-style, commando-inspired game. Fast, action-focused, minimal story. Gremlin changed plans and wanted something different. They were looking for a more story-based game, and Hill 19 didn't fit that direction. So the project was shelved. It was frustrating, but it also pushed me to move on to start something new. I set up a partnership company called Lightsource Productions. It was funded by the Margaret Thatcher Enterprise Allowance Scheme, which helped small startups get off the ground. Sci-Fi became the first game developed entirely under that banner. It was also my first Amiga game. I handled everything myself: coding, graphics, music, and sound. There was no team on this game, no artist, no musician. Just one person, switching roles constantly. Before the Amiga, I had been programming the Amstrad CPC 464 using a Z80 processor. Moving to the Amiga felt like a dream. Smooth hardware scrolling, more colors, dedicated chips for sound and graphics. But there was a challenge. There was no internet, no tutorials, no example code. I had to learn the Amiga and the 68,000 processor one from books and experimentation. A lot of experimentation. One of the most important Amiga chips was the blitter. The blitter made it possible to move large numbers of sprites and graphics quickly. Without it, Sci-Fi simply wouldn't have been possible. Smooth scrolling and parallax layers were very much in fashion at the time. Sci-Fi uses 4 layers of parallax scrolling to give the game depth. I also used the copper chip. This allowed color palettes to be changed line by line as the screen was drawn. It's one of the reasons Amiga games look so colorful. I made heavy use of palette swapping to create animation, the meteors that appear to be on fire, the lightning effects. They aren't animated sprites, they're color changes. Being the sole developer meant I had to create the graphics myself. Yes, programmer graphics. Never a good idea. Some graphics were hand-drawn. Some came from a fractal mountain routine I had written. That was my first experience with procedural graphics. Graphics that didn't need to be drawn by hand and could produce endless variation. Some graphics came from a video screen grabber. At the time, this was cutting edge and very unusual. It allowed for detail that would have been difficult to draw manually. Points to anyone who can name the film I borrowed graphics from for the main character, Stellar. The Amiga sound chip was equally impressive. It offered 4 independent sound channels, and with clever interrupt programming, even more was possible. I created the music using a tool called a sound tracker, squeezing as much atmosphere as possible into very limited memory. Getting the game published wasn't straightforward. A games agent initially had interest from US Gold, but it turned out he wanted royalties from all future games I wrote. So instead, we self-published Sci-Fi under Lightsource Productions. The game launched at the European Computer Trade Show in 1989 at Earl's Court in London. ECTS was huge. Very loud, very exciting. Companies like Ocean Software had massive stands, and you'd leave with carrier bags full of free giveaways. For a small independent developer, it was unforgettable. This is just the beginning. In upcoming videos, I'll be sharing stories and insights from many more games I've worked on. Some you might remember, and some you may never have seen before. For the Amiga, there's Kawasaki, Ferrari, Aftershock, Maximum Overdrive, Solar Wind, Terret, and Jedi. On the PlayStation, we'll look at the Net, Helix, Offensive, Tunnel B1, and the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And on the PC, titles like Cannon Fodder and Denki. To name just a few. Each game has its own story. The challenges, the experiments, the triumphs, and sometimes the failures behind the scenes. Stay tuned. There's a lot more to explore, and I can't wait to show you the worlds, the code, and the creative process behind them. For now, you are about to hear 1980s programmer music. Please turn the volume down. Seriously, let it stop.